Hello everyone, how are you all? I hope everything is fine. Welcome to our Internal Security Challenges for India series. This is our lecture 6th, and today we are going to start a new topic which is insurgency in the Northeast India. This is the part 1 of 3-part series on insurgency in the Northeast. In this lecture, we are going to understand what are the type of insurgencies that are going on in the Northeast, and we will see state by state brief introduction of the problem and what has happened. Again, like the structure that was followed in left wing extremism, we are going to divide these in 3 parts. All right. So let's start with the first part right now, the insurgency in the Northeast India. All right, so let's see some introduction first, in which I'll give you some basics, right? We'll see some maps to get the feel of the environment we are going to study about. So the northeast region of India has 8 states, right? Let's start with the top one: Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, right? Then Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, right? Nagaland, Tripura, then Assam. Oh, it's already been taken. Sikkim, right? Some part of North Bengal also, but they are like this area. But again, we are not going to study about that. We are going to study about these 8 states. So the first 7 states are called the Seven Sisters, except the Sikkim, right? The other 7 states are called Seven Sisters. See, the language spoken in this region, I'm talking about this region, is from Tibeto Burman region, the language spoken in this region, right? And some other interesting facts about Northeast, like Northeast region has predominantly tribal population, and they have a lot of ethnic diversity, lot of different diversity in terms of ethnic culture you will find. All right. Also, Northeast, as you know, it has a wonderful landscape, and we have, let's say, untapped potential of tourism over here, right? Economically, if we see, northeast has a lot of natural resources like oil, gas, coal, hydro. It also has a lot of fertile land. Tea gardens are very famous, right? So all these things can be harnessed for the development of the nation, but due to these insurgencies, many times supply and, let's say, the mining, supply of oil, mining, etc., gets derailed. Another some small facts for you: world largest river island is Majuli, which is in Assam, right? Cleanest village in Asia is Mawlyngong, it's in Shillong. All right. So overall, if we see that this region is culturally, ethnically, naturally quite diverse. It has This region has lot of languages. This region has lot of socio-cultural identities. So that is why some of the conflict is due to this diversity. We'll see which ones, right? And overall, this region has 8% of the country's geographical area and 4% of the national population. All right, so some facts for you before we move on. Now, this thing has also caused some trouble for internal security, right? And it has led to conflict with China and all, China, Bhutan. But point is, it's mostly covered in international relations, so we are not going to cover it here. But I'm going to tell you this thing in a little bit small, let's say, just in a minute, so that you can refer it from your IR notes. So this narrow corridor, known as Siliguri corridor, is also called as chicken neck. It is around 23 to 25 kilometer broad, and it is between Bhutan, right? Then Bangladesh over on the south. So it is sandwiched between these two countries, and it connects the 7 states, the Seven Sisters, to the mainland India or central India. All right, so remember this, and do read about the issues that have arisen because of Siliguri corridor. Although directly nothing is claimed, but China keeps basically trying to capture this area in order to separate the northeast part from our mainland India. If we see the international boundaries, India shares its boundary in the northeast with China and Nepal and Bhutan, Bangladesh and Myanmar. So China, oops, right, China, then Nepal, then Bhutan, Bangladesh, then Myanmar. So, speaking from the strategic perspective, speaking from international relations perspective, this area is quite important because 99% border of this area of northeast India, 99% of the border is international border. Only 1% border is with India, and which is here, this part. All right, only this part is the border with India. So this will help you understand why this area is very important. And in many insurgency related operations, we take help of Myanmar also and Bangladesh. So this area, this northeast India is a bridge to Southeast Asia. Remember this, right? All right, so I've talked about this already. All these points I've talked about in the last slide. All right. Okay, so now we move on to some definitions without which this lesson will not make sense in the large part. All right, so what is insurgency? Now this is different from Maoist and Jammu and Kashmir, almost similar but a little bit different also. Got it? So Indian sub-conventional doctrine, it defines insurgency as an organized armed struggle by a section of population against the state, usually with foreign support. So many times China also tries to influence our northeast insurgency. People, or let's say Myanmar doesn't support it directly, but somehow the insurgents try to use Myanmar and India border for their own nefarious purposes. Now, there are many causes of insurgency, like ideological. What is their thinking? Some insurgency comes because of the thinking of people. Then ethnic or linguistic differences. That means if people are from different cultures, they will try, if their own land is taken up by some other cultures people, they will try to attack them like this. Then socio-economic or political reasons. People try to use hate politics to start insurgency also. All right. So there are many causes of insurgency. We will see what are the causes in Northeast. Then sometimes there is also interference by external force, which might provide support or impetus to the insurgency of the country. Like sometimes China tries to interfere. What other terms we need to understand? Extremism. It is a state of mind, right, where a person has some extreme views. Now remember, this is a state of mind, it is not an action. It is when you have some extreme political or religious views, remember this, views. But militancy is a condition in which you actually attack because of those extreme views. Got it? So first comes extreme views, then you go and attack someone based on those extreme views. That becomes militancy. Remember this. So militant can be a person or a group, whichever human is attacking because of some extreme political or religious views, they are extremists, right? Although they are militants in the truest sense. So if they attack, just let me be clear, I think you might get confused. So let me be clear, militant attacks, extremist thinks. That's it. All right. So with these two things, let's now understand terrorism. Terrorism is basically for political reasons. Terrorist people try to further their political agenda by use of violence. So militancy includes terrorism. Got it? Now, religious violence is also militancy. Don't think that only terrorists or insurgents Even insurgents want to have a political win, or they have political extreme views. Religious groups also create violence or resort to violence to take their cause further. Got it? So, an insurgency. An insurgency will include, most probably, it includes two things. One is violent, one is ideological. Right? So, violent one is militant group of the insurgency, and ideological part is the extremists. The extremists spread the ideology. All right. Next, categories of conflict. This is very important. Now here you need to understand what are the categories of conflicts in the Northeast. Try to understand them carefully because different conflicts are there in different states. Right? So the conflicts in the Northeast region can be grouped under following categories. So the first one is the national conflict. Now this means that people want a separate nation itself, right? So currently they might be part of a nation, but they would then demand a separate nation. For example, ULFA will study about this. ULFA demand for sovereign Assam. Basically, they want a different separate nation, Assam, right? Then NSCN, again we'll study about it. This organization, there are actually many factions out of it. It's a socialist council of Nagaland, and they want a greater Nagaland. Again, we'll see these things, right? So, but just remember this, that they want a separate nation. Coming to next one, which is ethnic conflicts. We'll study about ethnic, this term ethnic and ethnic conflicts later on, but ethnic conflicts basically, this means that one group of people, right, they want basically their own thing. Ethnic basically relates to culture, so people of one culture want to basically become important, or they want to remove the control of another culture over them, like this. Sub-regional conflicts, right? In this, basically they want a state. They don't want a separate nation for themselves. They want a separate state under the Indian Union or any other country, like other examples. And they don't want to get separated from the nation. They want a separate state or autonomous unit inside the nation. Got it? For example, UPDS, the United Principles Democratic Solidarity in Assam. So these are the three categories of conflict in the Northeast region. Right. So let us understand ethnic. Now, ethnic is a term which is basically culture related. That means whatever you eat, whatever you wear, whatever you language you speak, whatever religion you follow. Got it? So ethnicity is a concept which is related to culture shared by a specific group of people. Got it? Now this is reflected. Basically, ethnicity includes language. If a group of people have same language, if group of people have same religion, their culture, right? Culture includes what you eat, है so what you wear, all these things, how you behave during festivals or what festivals you observe, right? Music and art. So ethnicity is a cultural thing, and ethnicity, since you can imagine that some people would think that their own culture is superior to another culture, so ethnicity is another source of conflict. But at the same time, ethnicity is also a source of cohesion, social cohesion, right? It brings people together, like in Asian ethnic people in, or Asian ethnic communities in Canada, Europe, or USA. Now, what is the conflict out of this? See, in this ethnic conflict, the issue is the source of conflict will be ethnic based, it would be culture based, and the solution will also be the culture based. So, the ethnic conflict includes reasons. So, the conflict will be ethnic, like the reason will be cultural, and the solution will also be cultural, which is basically saying that my culture will be better than yours, or your culture will be better than mine. So, only one culture will remain, like this. So, problem with India is that we have a lot of ethnic and religious groups. For example, we have around 2000 odd castes, there are 8 major religions. Major. There are many small religions. We have a lot of languages, like even constitution recognizes 22 languages. So we have a lot of cultural or basically ethnic diversity. For example, let's take an example. The Assam problem is there, which we'll study about. Then the Punjab problem is there, which is Assam problem is mainly a ethnic one. Sorry, Assam problem is the ethnic one. The Punjab problem is based on religious and regional conflicts, and the Hindu Muslim is a religious problem. Got it? Ethnic conflict, let me give some international examples. It is there in Balkans, Rwanda, Chechnya, Iraq, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Darfur, and Israel. We have recently seen the Israel issue, which was in news. All right. So these are some international examples. Now, what are the manifestation of ethnic turmoil and conflict in India? Like, how does it result in India? It results in linguistic ethnicity. It results in religious assertion and communalism, tribal movements, ethno-nationalism, regionalism, casteism. Now, these topics are society topics which forms the part of General Studies paper 1. So I will not be discussing them here, but I just wanted to relate them here so that you understand the topic in a wholesome manner. We'll just discuss ethno-nationalism because that relates to our topic the most. So ethno-nationalism means that a group, an ethnic group, want a separate nation where, like we have discussed before, it's a source of conflict. So relate with that. All right, it's the same thing. For example, secessionist movement in Kashmir, Khalistan movement in Punjab, all right, and the Naga movement in Northeast and the Assam movement. All right, so we have taken up a lot of basically the foundation. Now this will help you clear a lot of terms which we'll encounter right now. Historical background, if we see, we'll divide this in pre-independence and post-independence. So as we have just seen that lot of ethnic and cultural diversity is there in the Northeast, also in India overall. Got it? So Northeast basically has a major problem which is due to the ethnic diversity. All right. And if I have to summarize this historical background in some few sentences, basically the major issue is that the ethnic angle was not taken into account or was not given due importance, and no one is to blame. The things just come sometime happens. No political party can be blamed. Only what I mean to say is no single political person can be blamed or anything. All right. But again, we need to understand that whenever the states were designed or the boundaries were designed, the cultural and ethnic differences were not taken into account during the delineation of the state boundaries in the 1950s, due to which people basically got dejected and they wanted then separate states. All right. So before independence, now there are more than 100 tribal groups in the entire Northeast. Now they so many tribal groups and they have a lot of cultural diversity. They have a lot of different languages and customs. So during British era, they were the majority people. The tribals were majority in this area. Non-tribals had not yet come, but the British gave a special administrative status to this area, and in that they did not disturb this area. That means they did not let the outsiders come inside this area. So British people started keeping this area separate than the mainland India, from the mainland or central India. All right. For example, outsiders were not allowed to acquire land in this area. But at the same time, Britishers allowed the Christian missionaries to come into this area and establish schools, hospitals, and churches. Now, this was done so that the northeast area is kept separate and they do not basically follow the path of nationalism. That means, as in central India, lot of we can say that national movement was going on, right, for independence. So Britishers realized that this area is still untouched, so they started keeping it separate. So this policy resulted in isolation of the area from rest of India, right? So there was no mixing of religion, culture, or anything with the rest of India. So Northeast was kept separate due to the British policy. Got it? So that is why Indian freedom struggle has very less participation from this area, or rather impact, because if there was an impact, there would have been participation. So they never felt that what you can say, their the troubles of central India or mainland India. Then these area, the people living in the northeast never felt affected by those troubles. Hence, a feeling of alienation is, or basically started developing at that time. Got it? And the only experience of outsiders were the Britishers for the Northeast people and not the Indian people, right? The other Indian people, rather, I should say. Right? So we have discussed this. Anyway, I'll just repeat. So they started allegiance, or their allegiance to the newly formed Indian nation was somewhat lacking because the feeling of oneness was not there between the Northeast India and the mainland India. All right, I'm just technically saying mainland India for the lectures, right? Mainland India basically means not something which is island, which is an island. All right. What happened in the post-independence era? After independence, the central government focused on people-to-people contact. They realized what was done, so they started giving special concessions. And in this regard, sixth schedule of the constitution is only for this region. Now that sixth schedule gives autonomy, decentralization, self-rule. Hence, district and regional councils were established, and lot of power was given to the governor. All right. Initially, if we see, there was only one state of Assam and one union territory, NIFA or NEFA, or however you want to pronounce, Northeast Frontier Agency, which had and these two covered the whole Northeast India. Later on, NIFA was renamed as Arunachal Pradesh and was given a status of separate state in 1987. Right? Now, NIFA was going fine, but their trouble started in other areas of the region. And in the mid 1950s, like I just gave you a history of NIFA till 1987. Now, let's consider again post-independence of other areas, right? Or post-independence scenario in other areas. In that, Angami Fizo, he raised a banner of revolt in Nagaland, and that such revolts, the effect of it spread to Mizoram, Manipur, Tripura, Meghalaya. All right. Another reason for issue was in 1960. We don't, or you don't need to remember all of these facts by date, but the years that I'm mentioning, please remember them. Although I will discuss all of these facts again at least once. I'm just right now giving you a history. We'll discuss state by state, and there you will understand more. So in 1960, Assamese was made the official language of the state. Now this led to another reaction, especially in tribal districts. Because if you see the last point, the tribals were afraid of losing their identity because of the policy of Assamization. Getting the point? Assamization, basically imposing Assam or Assamese culture on the tribals. So this led to again alienation. All right. So lot of issues are there, and here you will see it's mostly about the ethnicity. So here we can see Angami Zapu Fizo. He was born in Khonoma on 16th May 1904, and the Nagas regard him as a father of Naga nation because he started the protest for it and demand for it. All right. Again, let's continue post-independence era. There were a lot of demonstrations and a major agitation developed. In 1969, Meghalaya was carved out of Assam. Got it? Finally, Meghalaya, Manipur and Tripura were granted statehood in 1972. In 1969, it was a state within a state, but later on it was made a separate state totally. Meanwhile, successionist movements began in Nagaland and Mizoram, basically demanding a separate nation. Nagaland was granted statehood in 1963. Mizoram became a state in 1987. NIFA was renamed as Arunachal Pradesh and granted the status in 1987. So lot of I've given you in all these points in a very summarized way. So lot of dates you don't need to remember it, but if you read all this 4 5 times, you will automatically remember. And I have created a timeline also in many of the sections. So don't worry, just try to understand right now. Don't try to remember any year. Just for your reference, there was a all-party Hill Leaders Conference. This was a political party in the Meghalaya. All right. Now this party fought elections and from like 1970 to 1982, and they won lot of power also. They were in power almost for 10 years, and that's it, I guess. So the hill areas, they merged into the all party Hill Leaders Conference, right? And they started demanding a separate state. Again, last 3 points we have discussed, and these 2 points also I just told you, right? So just for information, this is nothing to mug up or anything, just wanted to give you for understanding. Suddenly it is mentioned somewhere, so I just hope so that you know after after this. So what has the government done? Till now, I have not mentioned anything done by the government except the just immediately after independence. So government has signed lot of ceasefire agreements and suspension of operations with a lot of insurgent groups in the region. And government is also steadily, they have pursued a policy of talking, dialogue basically, and negotiation with lot of militants and their groups, right? In general, I'll show you the data also. The security situation has quite improved in the northeast. All right, so we come to that fact which will tell you the present situation. Now this is the profile of violence in the northeast region from 2012 to 2019. So lot of facts are there. We'll focus on these 2 years primarily. So the incidents have fallen from 1000 to 61. Extremists arrested have also fallen from 2000 to 188. Now, this doesn't mean that we have arrested less extremists. This means that less extremists have participated in the violence. Killing of extremists have also fallen. Same logic as extremists arrested. Arms recovered also have fallen. Special forces or the security forces personnel, no one was killed in 2019. Civilians also have fallen. They went highest in 2014. Then after that, a single digit number in 2019. Surrender has also fallen. Persons kidnapped has also fallen. So basically, all in all, things are going very well. Right, we have discussed this. This is just the analysis of the data. Almost no insurgency incident in Tripura, Mizoram, and improvement in other regions. No incidents or in Nagaland, incidents have increased. Security situation in Northeast has substantially improved from 2013. 2018 had the lowest number of insurgency and civilian deaths since 1997. A huge advantage for India and huge gain for our security forces. If we compare to 2017, insurgency incidents have declined 18%. Similarly, 25% reduction in number of civilian and security forces deaths. Alright, so now we will be seeing state-wise status. Quickly, we will be going through each state to understand the issues and why do they demand what they demand. So, before going ahead, just a map for you. Alright. First, we'll see Nagaland. Now, the first and the most significant insurgency that came in this region started in Nagaland under the leadership of Angami Fizo. This was in early 1950s. Now, for dates, I'll give you one tip. If you can't remember the exact year, just try to, recall if it is between 1950 to 1955 or 1956 to 1960. So if it is in the first half of the decade, you can say early 1950s. If it is in the later part, you can say the late 1950s. Got it? So this will also help you. So the Naga insurgency, it climaxed in 1956. It reached its highest point in 1956 because there was an armed struggle led by Naga National Council. Naga National Council, because they wanted secession or succession of Naga territories from India. They wanted a separate region itself. I'll show you that. All right. But what did the government do? Government utilized the Gandhian advice to engage with people and to reach a common ground. And the separate state was given, not a separate nation, but a separate state was given to the Naga people, right? Basically Nagaland. It was inaugurated in 1963. So we have discussed all this. I just discussed all these things with you. So what is the timeline? After independence, the Union government started integration of Nagas or Naga areas with the state of Assam. But hardliners, basically people who did not want to do this, led by Angami Fizo, they opposed this and they rebelled by forming Naga National Council. Now Nagas believed that they were not part of India at that time, and they did not want to give consent also to join India. Later on, NSCN formed Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland. It's a Naga nationalist group. Basically, they want Nagaland, their greater Naga limb. Right? So they want a sovereign state. They want a separate country called Nagalim, where all the Naga people live, come and live. And Naga people are not just in India; they are also in Burma, the Myanmar region. In the British era, if we see, Nagalands or Nagas were cut off from the social and political development of the country. I have told you about this, that Britishers kept this region separate and their culture was not disturbed. So they, when other people started disturbing their culture, especially after independence, these people revolted. All right. So we have discussed about whatever is written in this slide. We have already discussed about. So what is the Greater Nagaland? Now you see the map. First see the map. Nagaland, the dark one. Let me just change the ink. The area that I am marking right now, this is the current Nagaland state. And the outside one, which is the lines, right? Lines which are made like this. Just a second. So the lines, these are the Greater Nagaland map that they have drawn. Now if you see some portion, this portion, now this one is the area in Myanmar. All right. So Greater Nagaland is the most like the highest demand of NSCN-IM. NSCN-IM. ISWAC movie, okay. So we'll discuss about this later on. So the key demand of Naga groups is a separate state or nation rather than, that is Greater Nagalim, where all Nagas will live. It includes a lot of parts from different states like Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Assam, Myanmar. All right. They also want a separate constitution and a separate flag. Now, how did Nagaland become a state? Naga leaders under the leadership of Dr. Imkongliba, they negotiated with the government of India for the creation of state of Nagaland, but under the union government. Remember that. They did not negotiate a separate nation. Right, because government of India also refused to negotiate with the Angami Fizo or any other separatist. See, in the end, Indian government does not accept any demand of separate nation. They will accept, and they have accepted, the government has time and again accepted demand of a separate state, but they will never accept the demand of separate nation. All right. Government of India accepted their demand, and on 1963, 1st December, state of Nagaland was formed. What is the importance of this step? Because this was the first, let's say, the ethnicity based demand. So this step strengthened the national security and integrity, and it also restored the people's faith in the democratic values of the constitution, because non-violent people were or the government of India negotiated with non-violent people, right? Angami Fizo's faction was quite violent and they wanted total independence. But Indian government said you will get your freedom but only under the state, only under the constitution that is given to us. All right. If we see about the other factions, lot of, let's say, issues were there, and let me tell you one interesting thing which you might have heard about. In 2015, the Indian Armed Forces or Indian Special Forces, they did a mission against NSCN Khaplang, the NSCN faction of Khaplang, which was operating out of Myanmar. All right. So the hot pursuit thing. All right. So let us see the timeline so that you totally understand things. The British annexed Assam and they created a Naga Hill district in 1826. In 1918, they wanted autonomy and they formed a Naga club. In 1946, Angami Fizo forms Naga National Council and declares independence. In 1963, Nagaland state formed. All right. But still things were not going well. So Shillong Accord was signed and the NNC, the Naga National Council, which was formed in 1946, they were asked to give up arms, right? But due on this Shillong Accord were not accepted by everyone. So I've written here discord within Naga groups widens. So people did not, some people did not want to give up arms, especially NNC. The some faction in NNC did not want to give up arms, and NNC is splits, right? NNC splits into NSCN and NNC. Then NSCN again splits into Iswak Movia and Khaplak faction in 1988. All right. In in Shillong Accord, the issue was that it people accepted the allegiance to Constitution of India without any condition, but some people wanted a separate nation, so they got they that is why discord was happening and the NNC split. All right. In 1980s, this split happened, and finally 1988 it was basically 1980 they started splitting slowly, and in 1988 they completely split. In 1997 they formed a ceasefire agreement with the government in the faction of Iswak Movia, NSCN Iswak Movia. Now the NSCN Khaplang is again dangerous. So that is why in 2015, if you just remember, we discussed the hot pursuit was against NSCN Khaplang. In 2015, the government of India signed a framework agreement. Now remember, ceasefire agreement is for pausing the firing. Framework agreement is a different thing. So framework agreement was signed with NSCN IM, and details are not yet disclosed. All right. Now these three are peace initiatives that have been taken by Government of India, right? We have already discussed them, but I am just putting them in a separate slide so that there is a ready answer for you. In the framework agreement, the Government of India recognized the position of Nagas and their aspirations and promised to deliver things. So what is the peace accord? In peace accord, a framework has been basically agreed upon between NSCN IM and the Government of India. The agreement is yet to be signed. That means they have basically agreed upon big points like Government of India will not do this, or NSCN IM will not do this. All right. The Naga Peace Accord, but yeah, since it has not been signed completely, the agreement has not been signed, so still things are continuing, right? The people are still demanding, and even in 2019 the Naga groups carried a rally and they wanted early finalization of the peace accord. Now what are the major insurgent groups that are operating in Northeast India? Basically in Nagaland, and they are termed as unlawful associations under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So the NSCN Khaplang, it is termed as a terrorist organization and unlawful association. So there are two terms, unlawful association and terrorist organization. Then NSCNIM, NSCNKN, NSCNR. So these three organizations, most important is IM, they have a ceasefire agreement with the government, so they are not termed as terrorist or unlawful organizations. Now, this is the last point in the Nagaland issue. But on the agreement with NSCIM, the government of India and the Iswak Mr. Movia gave some talk. Or basically, what I'm going to share in this slide is basically what Honorable Prime Minister said and the head of or General Secretary of NSCIM said. Prime Minister of India said, "Unfortunately, the Naga problem has taken so long to resolve because we did not understand each other. It's a legacy of British rule. Like I mentioned, British people kept them separate. The colonial rulers had by design kept Nagas isolated. They propagated terrible myths about Nagas. They also spread negative ideas about the rest of India among the Naga people. So, divide and rule. It is one of the tragedies of independent India that we lived with this legacy." Anyways, so yes, it's a tragedy. Anyways, we see the Movia thing. TH Movia said the government and the Nagas are entering a new relationship. Beginning from now, challenges will be great. So challenges will be to form the particular things. Overall, they have agreed on things, but now attention will be on particular things. Now let's come to Assam. Just see the map. You don't need to remember the districts, but just see where it lies. Now before going on, the issue in Assam is the illegal migrants from Bangladesh. That's the reason. Alright. The threat to political identity. Listen to my words very carefully. The threat to political identity of Assamese people, right, lies. The threat lies in the illegal migrants that are coming from Bangladesh. The indigenous people, the people of Assam, they think that their future is in trouble because of the illegal migrants, which will become the majority, and the indigenous people will lose political power. So basically, people want their right over their own land. Alright. So after Nagaland, Assam is the most volatile state in the region. Beginning in 1979, people who lived in Assam, they demanded that the migrants that are coming from Bangladesh, and that too the illegal people, a lot of illegal migration was happening, and they wanted the government, the indigenous people of Assam wanted the government to deport these people, identify and deport. Alright, this movement was led by AASU, All Assam Students Union. They followed the path of non-violence first, by Gandhian way, by doing satyagraha, boycott, picketing, and court arrests, or basically courting arrests. And there was an accord signed, Assam Accord, with the union government in 1985. So under this provision, anyone who entered the state illegally between 1966 January to March 1971, they were allowed to remain, but they could not vote for 10 years. But those who entered after 1971, they were going to be sent back, like this. Alright, so this was Assam Accord. Now coming to the other part of this, Alpha or Ulfa. The Ulfa has carried out a lot of terrorist attack in the region. They target Indian military and also civilians sometimes. So although there are a lot of organizations that are demanding independence of Assam, the most dangerous one is Alpha. It was, as I said, formed to attack, or basically this is a military organization. So it was formed in 1975, and it wants to make Assam independent and establish a socialist government. The government of India, the state government of Assam, and Ulfa has signed a tripartite agreement to suspend the operations. But again, they are not following things, so Government of India has banned them under the UAPA Act. Alpha is being targeted by Indian Army also, all right, and because they are still targeting the Indian military. So Alpha is also being targeted by Bangladesh because Alpha goes whenever army or military in India starts attacking these rebels, they start hiding in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is also helping India in finding these rebels. All right, but currently Alpha has diluted its stand. They have agreed, so they have diluted their stand and they want to engage with the government. All right. National Democratic Front of Bodoland. Now this is also a big issue that is going on in Assam. Bodos are the single largest community among the notified scheduled tribes in Assam. Bodos are the largest community among the notified scheduled tribes in Assam. They are about 5 to 6% of the population of Assam. Right? So they started an armed struggle. Bodos started an armed struggle for a separate state around 1985. And this led to ethnic cleansing, like killing of people who were not Bodos. So basically, non-Bodos were ethnically cleansed around Brahmaputra. Now let's see about NDFB. This is also called as Bodo Security Force. It's a terrorist organization which is working in Assam and they want to create a separate territory for Bodo people. The union government has termed it as a terrorist organization. It was formed in 1998. All right. Heart of Bodo problem is the ancient rivalry between the Bodo tribes who are there from the ages and recent Bengali speaking immigrants. Right, so ethnic conflict. NDFB claims that Bodos are 10%, but according to official data, they are 5 to 6%. So in 2003, Bodo militants laid down their arms. They wanted to talk with the government and they formed Bodo Accord, under which Bodoland Territorial Council was created under the 6th schedule, right? And Bodoland Territorial Area District was created in 2003. Okay. Now let us see the map. So the region in the red, these 4 districts, Kokrajhar, Chirang, Baksa, Udalguri, these are 4 districts. All right. Now let me tell you something sort of, you know, funny. Not actually funny, but just a weird thing. So the Assam Accords of 1985. Now, Assam Accords of 1985, they addressed the issue of the Assamese people, but that led to Bodos, launching a movement to protect their own identity. So the Assam Accords of 1985 actually gave rise to the aspirations of Bodos, and 1987 they started protesting. All right. One thing I'd like to connect here is the demand for statehood spread to other region also, and we can see the different regions. Pashchimanchal in Uttar Pradesh, Harit Pradesh, Western Uttar Pradesh, Bundelkhand, Uttar Pradesh, Vidarbha in Maharashtra, Purvanchal, Uttar Pradesh, Bodoland, we have just discussed about it, Karbi Oglong in Assam, Gorkhaland in West Bengal, Awadh Pradesh in UP. Now, this is a celebration which was done in 2020, January 2020, celebration at the Bodofa House, the Central ABSU office in Kokrajhar, celebrating the signing of Bodo Accord. So ABSU is All Bodoland Student Union. All right, it was formed It was formed, okay, that is not necessary, but ABSU was the group that revived the Bodo statehood demand. Now let us see the three Bodo Accords that are signed. The first Bodo Accord was signed in 1993, which led to the creation of Bodoland Autonomous Council with limited political powers. Remember this, because with every agreement, some power have increased. Second, Bodo Accord. In this, it was agreed to create a self-governing body for the Bodo areas in the state of Assam. Right? So basically, they increase the powers. And in this, a Bodo Land Territorial Council was created in 2003, which was given financial and other powers. So BTC is an autonomous region in Assam. It is made up of 4 districts. We have seen them on the north bank of Brahmaputra by the foothills of Bhutan and Arunachal. The area under the BTC was formed under 2003. It is called BTAD. We have seen this Bodo Territorial Autonomous District. So the area is called BTAD and the council is called BTC. Now in 2020, now this was the celebration of that, this photo. 27 January 2020, a new accord was formed under which BTAD will be renamed as Bodo Land Territorial Region, not autonomous district. It will be now a region. It's basically a step up in the political power. Now this will, under this agreement, this there will be more power, legislative, executive, administrative power under 6th schedule to the Bodoland Territorial Council. Right now, this was given because Indian government did not want to basically give them statehood right now, or and they wanted to give them more powers, but not statehood yet. All right, and this agreement was signed between the Union government, the Assam government, and the Bodo groups, including all factions of the militant group, which is NDFB. All right, so 3 accords have been signed. Now, what is NRC? Again, NRC CA it's a GS2 topic, but here it will just be mentioned because without mentioning, full preparation will not be done. So, what is NRC? NRC is the list of Indian citizens and was prepared in 1951 based on 1951 census. The Assam student agitation, which was there in the 1980s, they wanted to basically expel the foreigners, right? Because Assam has seen a lot of migration. So people wanted an updated NRC. Over the years, after that NRC, people wanted more another NRC, and Supreme Court said to conduct in 2013 to stop and to remove the cases of illegal migration from Bangladesh. And NRC updation was carried out under the Citizenship Act, right? And the rules for this were Assam Accord. Now, why a separate NRC? Because of the migration. Remember, because of the migration. A little bit history, let me explain you. Because during British rule, we need to understand what happened. Assam was merged with Bengal Presidency for administration purposes. Now, from 1826 to 1947, the British people continuously brought the migrants in Assam for cheap labor. All right. After independence, more migration came in 2, let's say, seasons or 2 waves. First, just immediately after partition, from East Pakistan, people came. Then, aftermath of the war in 1971, people came again from Bangladesh. So this led to agitation during the 1979 to 1985 by the All Assam Student Union, which led to Assam Accords, all right, in which illegals will be identified and sent back. So quite a complicated history, but it is quite linked with our pre-independence history also. So hence we need to understand. All right. So what are the organizations that are termed as terrorist organization or unlawful associations under UAPA? ULFA is termed both. NDFB is also termed both. Kamtapur Liberation Organization is termed as terrorist organization. Alright, so let's move on to Manipur. Now, Manipur has a lot of ethnic or tribal diversity. As of today, Manipur is quite bad, in a quite bad state in the northeast as far as militancy is concerned. Right, because there are a lot of militant groups in this state, rather than anywhere else in the northeast. Right, and these people are not just fighting the government for something, but they are fighting together also. I mean, they are fighting with each other also. So violence is double in this state. They are fighting against the government also and against each other. People of Manipur have a lot of tribes, but the major ones are Meitei, Kuki, and Naga. So in the diagram, if you see, the red ones are the Meiteis, the green ones, this one, are the Nagas, and the light green ones are Kukis. These are the major tribal factions. The red ones in the middle and in the side are Meiteis. Now these Meiteis, they are almost 56 to 60%, and they live in plains, while Kukis and Nagas live in hills. Right. So the separatist insurgency began in 1964, and due to which Manipur was made a separate state in 1972. And right now, if you can believe it, there are almost 34 militant groups that are demanding independence from India. Right, violent and non-violent both groups. All right, some of these groups they already basically got separated and they formed one group called Manipur People Liberation Front. Not that important, anyways. Now, this thing, the issue in Manipur is linked with Greater Nagaland concept, which we discussed before. Because people are not just wanting a separate Manipur, but they want something else also. Because the Nagas want to remove some area from Nagaland, or basically Manipur also. Let me just shade this first, then you will understand. So the yellow part is Manipur. Got it? Right, so shaded part is Manipur. So Naga people want to take out area from Manipur, right, and join it in Nagaland. So the yellowish part they want from themselves, and the rest of the part will be separated then, right? So yellow plus black is Manipur, but Naga people want to take out the yellow part of the Manipur. Right, so they want to form the Greater Nagaland. Hence, this Manipur conflict is related with the Nagaland conflict also. So remember this relation. All right. So this Naga people want different things. Some other people want total separate state, like this. So there are a lot of conflicts. Basically, there is intra tribe issues. All right. And also one issue is there that not many people have also surrendered. In other areas, many people have surrendered in Northeast, but in Manipur, there is lot less surrenders, right? So this means the people of Nagaland or the tribes of Nagaland have very tight control on their own people. Okay. Now Nagas want some other state, Meiteis want their own state. So a lot of conflict is there. All right, so let us see something that was said by the governor. In recent times, there have been noticeable change in the insurgent movement. They are shifting away from the ideology of insurgency and indulging in terrorism. They are planting bombs, which are targeting innocent people, commercial establishments. Now, these statements are by Najma Heptullah. She is the governor of Manipur, all right. She also said that a lot of unemployment is there, economic backwardness is there, right, apart from law and order problems, which will affect the internal security of the state. So Manipur continues to be one of the most troubled states in the northeast due to all this problem, right. However, the governor also said that there has been a lot of improvements in the security environment, especially in the valley areas, due to well-directed counter-insurgency measures. So this is the official statement that you can consider. Now, what are the different terrorist organizations? People Liberation Army, United Nation Liberation Front. There are a lot of are there. We don't need to read everyone. One thing, a few features which I would like to discuss here is, in contrast with other insurgencies that are going on in Northeast India, Manipuri rebels are a little bit special or different because there is low number of surrenders, then low number of defections. Defections means from one group to another. They have a well organized, you can say, network of intelligence. So if a question comes to you that why insurgency has been difficult, in handling in Manipur, so you can write what governor said and you can write this also. So you can break up answer into two parts, right? Also, the rebels in this area don't target the local policemen. Why? To basically get the support of local people, right? And these people get their fundings from extortion. They extort temples, schools, businesses, right? Basically illegal taxation also in the form of protection fee, etc. So because of all these things, this Manipur area is inflicted with a lot of insurgency, which is difficult to remove also, which is becoming difficult to remove. Now let's come to Meghalaya. It is one of the least affected states in the northeast by insurgency. Problems in Meghalaya are there, but they are not that serious. But still, there are some tribes here which are divided between, or basically they are like two issues. One is tribe versus tribe, then tribe versus, or rather tribal versus non-tribal, right? Because ethnicity, because of culture, because of identity, that's all right. So non-tribals are basically Bangladeshis who are coming into the state. As you can see, this state borders with Bangladesh over here, right? So minority fear is there. Like if the immigrants come and they become large in numbers, so their tribals political power will fall. Now Meghalaya was carved out of the Assam state to address the unique needs of the tribes in the region, which are Garo, Khasi and Jaintias. So what are the issues that remain? See, intra-tribal issues are there. Basically, inter-tribe issues are there. Sorry, I think ahead before I said intra-tribal in relation to Manipur, it will be inter-tribal only. So inter-tribal issues are there between Garo, Khasi and Jaintias and also the non-tribals. So two issues which I have mentioned here: tribes and tribe versus tribe and tribe versus non-tribe. What are the two associations which are unlawful and terrorist organizations? Hainev National Liberation Council and Garo National Liberation Army. These are there which are termed unlawful and terrorist under UAPA. Now let's come to Arunachal. You can see the location it has in India and its districts. Now the people of three eastern district, the Longding, right, one, then Tirap and then Changlang. So these three districts, they have lot of issues, mostly because of the two NSCN factions that operate in this area, IM and K. All right. And IM operates here because according to their ideology, these three districts are the part of Greater Nagaland. Greater Nagaland. Also, Alpha is present in this area. So these three regions, these three districts are quite insurgent prone. There are a lot of terrorist activities here, militant activities here, right? Arunachal Pradesh, one more thing, although it's a peaceful state, right there, but there was also issues, but ceasefire agreement was there, right? And after that much more peace has prevailed, which was, and this agreement has been renewed every year, especially with NSCN Khaplang, which was very active in Tirap. Tirap is the second one. But they stopped the NACN stopped the signing in 2015, and after which they launched devastating attacks in Manipur on the army. Now this is the recent news in April 2020, last month. The government of India extended the ASPA in 3 districts of Arunachal Pradesh, and these 3 districts were Tirap, Changlang, and Longding. Got it? So these three districts still have these issues because of two factions of NSCN and ULFA. Now next we come to Mizoram. You can see its location in India. It is bordering with 2 other countries. Now situation similar to Nagaland developed after the Nagaland issue in Mizo district, which was autonomous. In 1966, Mizo National Front, they declared independence from India only. Like they like, we are independent, we are not part of India, which of course was after independence. So government of India responded with strict police army action, and they took a lot of counter insurgency measures, and within few weeks insurgency was crushed. Now in 1972, the less extremist Mizo leaders, they wanted a state within Indian Union. They said that we don't want independence, but we want a state. Hence, Mizo district of Assam was separated, and Mizoram was given a status of UT first. Right, later on it became a state within just few years, but first it was given a status of a UT. Alright, so this state is a success story in the region because there was also insurgency here, but due to development, it was slowly, it was first, it was the agreement was signed, and slowly development came, and then lot of insurgents gave up their ideology. Okay, in 1986 a deal was signed, right? Peace deal was signed with the Mizo National Front, and after this only in 1987 statehood was given on February 20, 1987. In the Mizoram became the 23rd state of India. And after the formation of state, the authorities in the state increased a lot of focus on agriculture and creation of its development. But still there are some issues because of economy, right? And there are some identity issues over who should be recognized as scheduled tribe and not, because of which some issue will develop in the future, and issues are still simmering. They are not that violent, but still issues are there. All right, let's come to Tripura. Please see its location. Now in Tripura, post independence, lot of changes happened in the demography of the state or of the region. People started coming from East Pakistan, right? At the time of independence, tribals were 70% of the population and 30% were non-tribal. But recently the ratio has reversed. 70% is non-tribal, 30% is tribal. So this has led to insurgency. And this is just not just recent thing, but yeah, I think I said recent. Please ignore that. This is not just recent, but This was like in the last 30 before 30-40 years. Now this led to Tripura National Volunteers extremist outfit. However, government intervened and they set up a scheduled council which brought the tribal areas under land reform and which has reduced such violent means. Right? People have started accepting what the government was doing. But still, tribals are not happy because they don't want to lose their custom. They don't want modern ideas imposed over them. Since Tripura borders Bangladesh, so many people started smuggling, and militant group also started crossing borders in this area. Hence, many people started joining the terrorist organization, and few terrorist organization, or let's say militant organizations, emerged. Then migration came. Due to migration, also people started hating the outsiders. All right. And due to conflicts in neighboring states such as Mizoram, also people are coming into this state. So in Tripura, all Tripura Tiger Force is there, which is the terrorist organization and unlawful association. National Liberation Front of Tripura is there, which is terrorist organization and unlawful association. Now last, Sikkim. This state has quite high development as compared to the other seven sisters, and here they have been successful in forming a balance between various ethnic groups, which are Lepchas, Bhutias, and Nepalis. Now the development is higher, so that has led to higher employment, and which has led to more stability. Because if people do not, this is the truth, if people do not get jobs, if they do not have economic prosperity, and if their economic status of living is not increasing, they will obviously blame the government, and because government is responsible. All right. So what is the conclusion of overall these things? Whatever the discussion which we had today, what is the conclusion? See, there is an anger towards non-local people, non-ethnic people, right? Or different ethnic people. So there is the insurgency comes because of various reasons like non-local. We don't want, or they don't want people who are entering their land without their consent, or they just don't want to accept other people. And we can understand, because if somebody comes in your home and tries to take away your power, then obviously you will revolt. So there is anger against non-locals, there is anger against other ethnic people of the same region, there is tribal versus tribal rivalry, then there are economic issues, economic growth is not happening. Now all these are leading to resentment, and this resentment is becoming the foundation of insurgent groups, right? So because of this resentment from non-local, ethnic, tribal issues and economic issues, first of all it is giving the foundation and also the source of, basically you can say, sustainability. Just a second. So this resentment is leading to foundation and sustainability of insurgent groups. Another thing is that this region is quite resourceful, right? Lot of natural resources are there: oil, coal, natural gas. So lot of insurgency will derail economic growth of this region. So what government needs to do is it needs to have pro people policies here. We need to understand that their diversity needs to be respected, and everybody wants just their share of land, and it's not a wrong thing but from any sense. This is my opinion, this is not the government's policy, this is just my opinion. So what we need to do is, finally we need to give Northeast the focus it deserves, and we need to stop its political alienation, and we should stop the judgment which we have, which many people from mainland India have towards Northeast people, that they are not part of India. That is such a wrong thinking. So we need to stop stereotyping them like this. All right. This area is obviously part of the country politically and culturally. The unity we have with the whole country, the unity that we have is also because of our diversity, and the richness of diversity that leads to strength of the country as a region. All right. So that is all for this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll be continuing the issues and we will see separate topics like we have done in LWE. All right. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. I hope this session was helpful for you. Right. We'll see each other in the next session. Till then, please take care. Take care of your health. Take care of family in these trying times, and be safe and do revise. All right. Bye bye.